If you're watching this channel, it's because you don't enjoy watching the world squander what Christendom built, but you want to do your part. And chances are you've heard me mention a great means by doing just that. Email made by and for Catholics. Check out fidei.email. That's FIDEI.email. Built for Catholic individuals, families, organizations, and groups. They're private, secure, and of course, they're Catholic. And they're offering 2 months off on your first year for an annual subscription if you enter the coupon code Return to Tradition without spaces. That's the name of this channel, without spaces, at checkout. There are some wondering if we're about to see a schism in the church. I reported a year ago a strange situation brewing in India. There's been a liturgical dispute going on in that country between the Catholics of the Syro-Malabar Rite over the liturgy. Now, if you're not familiar with the Syro-Malabar Rite, it is one of 24 particular churches in the Catholic Church, with 6 different liturgical rites practiced throughout the church. Now, what does that mean? These churches, all 24, are all part of the Roman Catholic Church. They're all in full communion with the pontiff. They're all self-governing, including often having their own codes of canon law. But they are all fully Catholic. Many Roman Rite Catholics will often feel the draw to go to Mass on Sunday in whichever one of the Eastern rites has parishes near them because of the liturgical chaos in the Latin West. And while you're certainly welcome in those parishes, you will be in for, we'll say, a bit of a culture shock. The liturgy is different, often very different than what you're used to. It's presented differently, and the Eucharist is distributed differently as well. Now, if you intend to go to Mass at an Eastern Rite parish, I do advise checking in early at the parish and finding someone who can help you navigate things to avoid any faux pas or embarrassing moments. And oftentimes, the priests of those parishes want to meet you first to make sure that you can receive. They're very tight about that stuff. The Syro-Malabar Rite is one of the larger rites of the Church, and it can be found all over the Middle East and in India. And it's in India that we're particularly interested today because, as it turns out, the Church in India is going through some serious strife, to put it mildly. This strife has led to actual conflicts among Catholics there. Physical conflicts, not merely a battle with words or going to the courts or whatever, but actual physical conflicts. And this conflict could lead to schism in the local church, which is incredible to think about. Even some media outlets in that country have suggested that schism within the church there is brewing, though the media usually gets these things incredibly wrong, as the track record often shows. So our story today comes from ucanews.com. They are a local outlet to that country, I believe, and we'll go to them for the details. Quote, India's Eastern Rite Syro-Malabar Church has condemned violent protests against a visiting pontifical delegate, tasked with finding a solution to its decades-old liturgy dispute. A section of Catholics in the church's Ernakulam on Gamali Archdiocese on August 14th, apologies for pronunciation, publicly protested against Bishop Cyril Vassal, the pontifical delegate appointed to the Archdiocese. The protest against the pontifical delegate, quote, is highly condemnable, said a statement issued by the church on August 15th. The Jesuit archbishop was blocked from entering the St. Mary's Cathedral through its main door, and police had to help him enter the cathedral through a side door and offer prayers. The cathedral has been closed since last December following a physical altercation inside it that was triggered by the liturgy dispute. The agitated crowd also threw water bottles and eggs at the pontifical delegate. The same people who asked for a pontifical delegate are blocking him and staging a protest against him, it said. Priests and laity of the archdiocese agreed to a pontifical delegate finding a solution after the dispute pitched them against the Synod of Bishops after years of negotiations failed to find a solution. The protests were, quote, unjustifiable and unchristian, said Father Anthony Vadakakera, a public relations officer of the church, in the statement. The slogans against the visiting papal delegates were, quote-unquote, inflammatory, the priest said. Vassal, who arrived at the church's headquarters on August 4th, issued an exhortation, saying his mandate is to implement an order of the Mass approved by the Vatican and the church's synod. The priests and laity of the archdiocese have rejected this liturgy, in which the celebrant faces the altar, meaning the tabernacle, folks. They want to continue with a liturgy in which the celebrant faces the people throughout, end quote. So time for some background. There's been a dispute in the church, to put it mildly, in India for years. Francis last year ordered that the liturgy in India be offered by the priest in a more traditional way. We won't say strictly traditional, but a more traditional way. And you may be surprised by that, but remember, Francis has stated that his mandate is to fully implement the documents of the Second Vatican Council, and one of the things the Council did that was absolutely right was to tell the Eastern Rite churches to keep their traditional liturgies, and to keep their various traditional identities. This includes making the traditional Eastern liturgy in question keep its core identity, including the postures of the priest. See, there was a problem after the Council. After Vatican II, some rites of the East decided to Novus Ordo up their masses anyway, despite what the Council actually said, or Divine Liturgy, as it often gets called in the East. We saw this with the Maronite Rite, and in some aspects of the Syro-Malabar Rite, and maybe in others, which is what we're talking about in this video. Now, if you're not aware, the Maronite Rite is another one of the liturgical rites of the Church associated with the Maronite Catholic Church, which is found predominantly in Lebanon and surrounding countries, as well as in countries where there are a fair number of people who move from Lebanon. I've attended a Mass or Divine Liturgy in the Byzantine Rite and in the Maronite Rite personally. Now, in the Maronite Church, there is apparently a similar liturgical debate going on, though it is actually a debate and it's not a physical thing that's going on. I'm just not as plugged into the particulars of that debate as I have been with the Syro-Malabar issue. The people voicing opposition to these liturgical changes in the Syro-Malabar Rite are highly energized too, to put it mildly, and in ways that go well beyond any Catholic concept of proper behavior. If you think Catholic discourse in the West gets heated because of uncharitable online discourse, mean online trads and all the rest, just remember that those interactions never turn physical. That just doesn't happen. No one has interrupted masses in the Novus Ordo to tell the priest and laity that they're allegedly doing it wrong, except with that one case of what was going on in Fatima recently, but there's other reasons for that. And to my knowledge, the reverse hasn't happened, not since the 70s anyway. The traditional liturgy hasn't been interrupted in that way, to my knowledge, at least not since the 70s. But in India, this is entirely different. Physical altercations have broken out. Priests using the same altar to offer the Mass at the same time in their disputed ways of offering Mass. That has happened. They've literally tried to push each other off the altar numerous times. And the really wild thing about this is that they are willing to give up everything for this. And I do mean everything. From the article, quote, "The Church's statement urged the protesters to abstain from protests in, quote, the true culture of the Christian faith, because such protests are, quote, a disgrace to the entire Church. The protests violated the boundaries of the, quote, ecclesiastical discipline," it stated, and added that, quote, "disrespect and opposition to the pontifical delegate is disobedience to the Holy Father. Those who have disrespected him should apologize. They should realize their mistakes, abandon their narrow interests, and stay close to the Church," the statement said. Meanwhile, on August 15th, some 250 archdiocesan priests offered a solemn Mass in the cathedral, which was attended by representatives from almost all parishes in the archdiocese. The priests followed their liturgy facing the congregation, opposed to the synod-approved Mass. Father Kyriakose Mundaden, secretary of the Presbytery Council, in a public address outside of the cathedral after the Mass, said that 5 million Catholics and more than 450 of the 470 priests in the archdiocese would not make any compromise and accept the synod-approved Mass. He also renounced the priests' resolve to continue with their protest for, quote, justice, saying they were prepared to sacrifice everything for the Mass they hold so dear. Vassal, however, in an interview with a Catholic Malayalam news channel, expressed the hope that priests will eventually fall in line as they will not disobey the Pope, end quote. This is wild stuff, made all the wilder by Francis trying to impose what at least looks like a more traditional Syro-Malabar Rite than what we've got going on there now, one that would be in accordance with the requirements of Vatican II, or at least more in accordance with it. But I want to zero in on one statement that was there. The behavior of everyone involved violates ecclesiastical discipline. What does that even mean? That is a diplomatic way of saying that these priests are violating canon law in a serious way. In fact, the violation is so serious that ecclesiastical disciplinary violations can lead to excommunication. After all, they are blocking a bishop who is a delegate of the Pope from trying to get into the cathedral, or so they would say. Now, I doubt that this will lead to excommunication of any of the priests involved, though if I was a bishop stirring the pot there by defying Rome on this, I'd be worried about getting punished for my role in all of this. Under normal circumstances, a priest could likely face punishment, but literally 90% of the priests in the diocese in question are willing to give up everything for this liturgical battle. That's more than 90%, 450 out of 470%. And that would include also their lives, by the way. They said that. They believe in Mass facing the people so much that they are willing to behave in ways that no Catholic should ever consider behaving in. Like, again, trying to actively push a priest away from the altar in the middle of the offering of the holy sacrifice of the Mass, so that you can offer your own Mass in the form that you find that you are in conflict with. They push keeping bishops out of the cathedral. That's another thing. And under normal circumstances, you could absolutely see priests excommunicated for this, but I seriously doubt you'll see Rome intervene and excommunicate more than 90% of the priests in the diocese in question. Perhaps any ringleaders of these outbursts, but beyond that, it's all unlikely. We haven't heard the last of this, folks, so I'm curious, though, what you think about this. Let me know in the comments. And do you expect to think this could come to the West? Do you think this kind of behavior could influence the behavior of Catholics outside of India? Is this something that's just unique to that place, due to cultural dynamics that we're just not privy to? Do you think this could lead to schism, as some observers are suggesting? Do some of you approve? Maybe not with their wanting, versus populum, meaning Mass facing the people, but do you approve of the tactics? I cannot endorse them. I just can't, but I'm curious what you think about this. So let me know what your hot take is on all of this in the comments, please. And like and subscribe if you haven't, it does help. So does sharing this on social media, that helps enormously too. And as always, pray for the Church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.